Welcome to the First Metro. I am Mansi Fadke, a thoroughbred Mumbaikar, and once every fortnight, I try to bring you a view of India through Mumbai tinted glasses. About 15 years ago, Bandra station figured prominently in my workday as every evening I used to head back to my office in Nariman Point after having spent several hours meeting officials at either MMRDA, MSRDC, MHADA, or SRA. I used to cover the infrastructure and housing sectors as a daily beat at that time. The tin roofs of Garib Nagar, the slum, were almost at level with the footover bridge of the Bandra station, and I used to drag my feet languidly through that stretch. It used to be a sight that summarized Mumbai. At that time of the day, the sun would cast an orange halo over the thicket of Bandra's buildings and then the endless shanties of Garib Nagar. To my left, people rushed towards the platforms in a manic hurry, and to my right, oblivious to it all, children played on the top of the Garib Nagar roofs that were seamlessly meeting each other, creating almost a tin floored playground. It was this image that my mind took me back to when I first heard about the Garib Nagar demolitions and the clashes that ensued. The demolitions will make life easier, and rightly so, for the people who I used to see on my left, rushing to catch the trains as if their lives depended on it. Because the Western Railway plans to use this land for a much needed infrastructure upgrade. But the demolitions came at the cost of those who I used to see to my right, trying to make the most of life in a city harsh on anyone without a decent amount of money. Agreed, the Western Railway, which had been trying to clear its land of encroachments for years, took action only after a decade long court battle that identified all but 100 structures as illegal. But the sight of children turned homeless overnight, families lugging household belongings like stoves and buckets out with nowhere to go and no alternative arrangements was just very sad. About 50% of Mumbai's population lives in slums, give and take a couple of percentage points here and there. A 2023 report by the state government Slum Rehabilitation Authority (SRA) says that of Mumbai's total habitable area of 34,000 hectares, around 24%, that is 8333.53 acres, is covered by slums. For as long as I've been writing on Mumbai, which is close to 2 decades, that figure has barely budged despite the state government's policy of free in situ rehabilitation for eligible slum dwellers through the SRA, and despite the eligibility criteria having had an elasticity that has been linked to the polls. It was moved from 1st January 1995 to 1st January 2000 and later expanded to include tenements built between 2000 and 2011, the occupants of which were considered eligible for rehabilitation at a small fee of 2.5 lakh rupees per house. The SRA perhaps has been more instrumental in Mumbai's vertical expansion than its slum eradication. Developers of all kinds lined up to get a pie of the construction incentives in return for slum redevelopment. More than a slum community driven model, it became one driven by developers. Many projects languished with developers struggling for clearances when they hit roadblocks in determining eligibility of slum dwellers for free in situ rehabilitation, got stuck in litigation, and reeled under financial pressures. Where projects were completed, the living conditions of slum dwellers seem to have gotten no better, with the new buildings being constructed in a very prison like manner with poor ventilation and lighting. And the entrance was most definitely separate than the entrance for the buildings that form part of the developer's sale component. How else would developers be able to justify charging crores for flats with slum dwellers as neighbors? Just earlier this month, even the Bombay High Court remarked how Mumbai's goal of slum extinction has largely remained a dream on paper, listing pretty much the same reasons, including the replacement of actual slums by vertical slums, which is poorly built houses. The residents of towers that have been products of SRA projects, slum rehabilitation projects, usually look at the vertical slum next to their plush housing societies and rationalize their crores that they have put into their house with statements like, we'll at least have plenty of domestic help easily available. This is also something that I've heard from people whose balcony views are marred by specks of slums. The SRA has so far built over 2.79 lakh rehabilitation tenements that have received occupation certificates from the BMC, and work on 3.36 lakh rehabilitation tenements is underway. If 50% of Mumbai's population lives in slums, That amounts to at least 65 lakh, going by the BMC's population estimate as of 2023, which is 1.3 crores. You don't even need to do the math for this one to know how inadequate and slow the slum rehabilitation efforts have been. Fundamentally, why is slum extinction one of the city's priorities? Yes, slums are blocking a very scarce public resource, which is land that is much needed to build roads, railway lines, government buildings, and legal affordable houses. Of the 8333.53 acres of slum land in Mumbai, only 3620.94 is privately owned. Rest is all public land. But there is one more reason that our slum rehabilitation approach has so far overlooked, and that is dignity of housing. Is this any way to live? With houses made of tin roofs, industrial scrap, plastic, and tarpaulin that are permanent fire hazards. Basic hygiene norms go for a toss due to the proximity of the houses to each other and the sheer density of the population, with families of anywhere between 5 and 10 members packed into 100 to 200 square feet houses. These are the people who build Mumbai's ivory towers, who clean the city's drains, lay the water and gas pipelines, catch rats before the city wakes up, sell vada paos to hungry office goers outside stations, and bend over backwards as domestic help. And they did not choose to live like this. The city, decade after decade, year after year, has consistently failed them by providing little choice in terms of affordable rental housing. In 2017, my husband and I had saved enough for a down payment on a house we really liked, of course, with some cushioning from our parents' savings as well. But I'd always dreamed of a house in Mumbai with a balcony large enough to accommodate 100 plants and where it's so windy and breezy that it's kind of a cool embrace that just takes away all the tiredness and anguish of the day with it. This house was exactly that. We had a meeting scheduled with the developer one night, and post work, I was standing on the main road in Parel trying to hail a cab when I saw a homeless man spread a plastic mat on the pavement and he was about to settle in for the night. A Mumbai police constable happened to walk past and told him in no uncertain terms that he could not sleep there. When the man paid no heed, the constable simply pulled out his water bottle, opened it, and emptied it all over the mat. There was now no way that he could sleep on it. I cried bitterly that night. Here I was, praying that the deal for my dream house goes through without a glitch, weaving images in my head of how happy we could be there as a family, where a man was struggling to find a place to rest his head just for one night. I live in that dream house now with my cognitive dissonance, but even now, when I look back at that incident, I don't judge the constable. He was only doing his duty. And I'm sure he wasn't really returning to a particularly rosy housing situation either, given the dire straits our police housing condition is in. I judge our city and its inability to provide night shelters that the constable could have very easily pointed the man towards. What is a long term option for someone like him? Leaving the city or being part of the informal slum economy? On paper, our approach to dealing with slums has definitely evolved. Between the 1950s and the 1970s, the idea was to simply clear slums and protect public land. In the next couple of decades, the state started taking a more humanitarian approach. In 1971, the government got a regulation to deal with slums, the Maharashtra Slum Area Improvement, Clearance and Redevelopment Act. The government started issuing identity cards to slum dwellers and providing the living basics: water, drainage, toilets, street lights. Much of this happened through political will as leaders built their electoral fortunes on the patronage they got in return for pushing for these basic facilities. It is the same political will that is also held responsible for turning a blind eye as the slums mushroomed. The 1985 case of journalist Olga Tellis and others versus the then Bombay Municipal Corporation was a landmark in framing the approach towards encroachments. The Supreme Court for the first time recognized the right to livelihood as part of the constitutional right to life. The court said no person had the right to encroach on footpaths, pavements, or any other place reserved for public purposes. But it called for rehabilitation of eligible slum dwellers, sufficient notice to be provided before eviction and demolition, and prohibited any action in that particular case until 1 month after the monsoon ends. The SRA was set up in 1995 to speedily take up in situ slum redevelopment projects. Over the last 5 to 6 years, the bureaucrats heading the authority have tried to make slum redevelopment easier and more efficient. For example, it was decided that the eligibility survey, known technically as the Annexure 2, should be done for slums pan Mumbai in a mammoth exercise once and for all and be digitally recorded so that the slum redevelopment projects can be taken up efficiently wherever the Annexure 2 is ready. Further, the SRA has been earmarking slum clusters and inviting bids from developers to take these up. These steps, however, are yet to show visible effects. Back at Garibnagar, it isn't as much about the demolitions as it was about how they were carried out. The monsoon is just around the corner. So is the start of the school year. There are all these people who suddenly have no shelter, like the man in the plastic mat I'd seen in 2017. Their options are perhaps not much different from his. Either leave the city or be a part of its informal slum economy. If not in Bandra's Garib Nagar, then somewhere else. That's all I have for you for now. Thank you for watching the First Metro. I will be back with another episode soon.